Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're focusing on something that I think everyone has dealt with. It's one of the most insidious, friction-causing habits in how we interact with each other. Passive aggression. That low-level hidden tension. The endless cycle of hints and unspoken feelings that it slowly eats away at trust in every kind of relationship. Our sources today, they argue that this cycle is completely avoidable, but, and this is the big but, only if we're willing to swap that hidden tension for something that's, it's difficult, but it's essential. Radical clarity. So our mission in this deep dive is to basically shortcut the path to understanding not just the behaviors of passive aggression, but the psychological roots that actually drive them. Then we're going to look at some really actionable steps for shifting toward a healthier way of being, creating what the sources call a culture of clarity.
It's such a critical topic because passive aggression, let's just call it PA, it's really just discomfort or frustration or even anger being expressed indirectly.
Communication in disguise.
Exactly. It is communication in disguise. It's an emotional message, wrapped in avoidance, just hoping the other person will magically figure out what's wrong, all without you having to risk the vulnerability of an actual conversation.
Okay, so let's unpack that. We all know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of PA, but what are the specific telltale behaviors? The things that immediately signal, okay, this tension is here. What does that hidden language actually look like?
Well, the behaviors are quiet, but they are so potent because they signal displeasure while at the same time actively avoiding any responsibility for it.
Right.
The sources point to things that create distance. So avoidance is a big one. Ignoring messages, constantly changing the subject, or, strategically not being available right when a difficult conversation might come up.
And then there's the one that injects negativity under the cover of, humor. Sarcasm that has a real sting to it. It lets someone deliver a really hurtful message, but then immediately retreat behind, hey, I was just kidding.
Absolutely. And then you have the more direct acts of emotional withdrawal, like the classic silent treatment.
Oh, yeah.
It's withholding communication as a form of punishment. And it achieves the exact opposite of what the person usually wants, which is attention or validation. Instead, it just creates more distance, more anxiety. It never brings resolution.
My favorite, or I should say, my least favorite, is the subtle sabotage. It's what the sources call half-hearted compliance. They agree out loud to do something, but then you see them just drag their feet, or they miss the deadline, or they do a poor job, or they conveniently forget, all because they're actually upset or resentful about it.
And what's so fascinating, and something you have to understand, is that this behavior, it's not usually born from malice. It's almost universally a protective mechanism, an old survival strategy, which, it raises a really profound question. What exactly is passive aggression protecting us from?
It sounds like we're talking about fear. Fear that's hiding behind frustration.
Exactly. The number one origin is a deep-seated fear of conflict. For so many people, it just feels safer to be indirect than to risk a fight or anger or rejection or even just disappointing someone they care about.
So they're operating on these beliefs like, if I speak up, they'll get mad, or my needs aren't important enough to cause a fuss.
Yes. And if that fear is the core, that ties directly into past experiences. I mean, if you grew up in a home or maybe a previous workplace where speaking honestly led to punishment or shame or ridicule, indirect communication becomes a deeply learned automatic habit. The mind just learns that it is safer to be quiet than to be truthful.
That makes perfect sense.
And the third key origin, which often drives this later in life, is that feeling of being unheard, of being powerless. If a person's honest attempts to communicate were just consistently dismissed or ignored, they eventually stop trying to use words. They start using behavior instead. PA becomes the voice of someone who feels they just don't have a real voice in the room.
So, okay, if the behavior is protective, how do our sources suggest we manage that immediate anxiety, the anxiety that pops up when we even think about communicating clearly? Because that's what makes people retreat back into avoidance.
That really is the crux of it. The key insight here is that unspoken feelings, they never just disappear. They build up beneath the surface like steam in a boiler, and they leak out indirectly, often at the worst times. So we think we're avoiding conflict, but we're really just delaying it, and we're making it worse in the long run. The answer is in self-regulation. Understanding the trigger before we jump to the reaction. And that brings us to the inner work.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The sources make this compelling case that before we can even hope to communicate clearly with others, we have to first address our own internal landscape. Because passive aggression, so often it's rooted in our relationship with ourselves and our own feelings.
Yes. The healing starts with intentional self-awareness. We have to commit to just observing our emotional reactions without that immediate pressure to fix them or act on them. The sources recommend starting with really simple foundational practices, like mindful check-ins. Just pausing 3 or 4 times a day to ask, what am I feeling right now?
And I think the physical awareness piece, the body scanning, is so crucial there. Our bodies, they speak before our thoughts do. The second you feel that tightening in your shoulders or your jaw clenching or that knot in your stomach, that is the physical sign of a suppressed emotion. Irritation, disappointment, fear, whatever it is.
Exactly. You're noticing the symptom before you even have a diagnosis. And once you notice it, the next step is emotional labeling, naming the emotion accurately. So instead of just saying, I'm stressed, you drill down to, I'm feeling fearful about the deadline, or I am feeling frustrated because I feel unheard. That simple act of naming it with precision, it really does reduce its power. It stops it from just simmering under the surface.
So let's turn this inward for a second. We have to identify the PA in ourselves, those subtle inner cues, the shadow behaviors that tell us we're about to slip into avoidance mode.
We all have them. Look for that low-grade irritation that's just bubbling under the surface, the one you keep telling yourself isn't there, or that really strong desire to withdraw when someone asks you a direct question about how you're feeling. And the most common one, that reflexive urge to say, nothing's wrong, when every part of you is screaming that something is definitely wrong.
And that then shows up in shadow behaviors, right? Like
What?
putting off tasks when you're annoyed, which is a really common form of self-sabotage.
Absolutely, because resentment is a motivation killer. When you resent the request, you subconsciously slow down or postpone the action, even if it hurts you in the end. Another big one is being overly nice, almost sickeningly sweet, while inside you're just furious. You create this huge gap between your internal reality and your external performance.
And the classic one that just drains energy from every relationship, expecting someone to guess what's wrong and then getting doubly upset when they fail your mind reading test.
That expectation might be the single biggest source of passive aggression. So the crucial shift for you, the listener, is moving from that unconscious emotional reaction to intentional emotional responsibility. And you do that by asking 3 questions before you react. First, what am I really feeling right now? Can I name it? Second, what do I actually want or need here? Clarity inside is the first step to clarity outside.
And that last gut check question, am I expecting this person to read my mind right now? If the answer is yes, then you know. You know you need to step up and use your voice no matter how scary it feels. So the ultimate goal here isn't just to stop being passive-aggressive. It's about proactively building a whole new standard for our environment, a culture of clarity. What does that even look like in our day-to-day relationships?
Well, in a romantic relationship, clarity is the absolute bedrock of emotional intimacy. When you replace all the hints and assumptions with clear statements of what you need, you stop the guessing games. You stop the silent expectations that cause so many partners to just drift apart. With clarity, love becomes less about, navigating a minefield and more about peaceful collaboration.
And in the workplace, the stakes are different, but maybe just as high. Clarity there transforms efficiency and trust.
It really does. I mean, think about all the PA in an office. Avoiding emails, gossiping instead of confronting someone, dragging your feet on a project because of some unstated resentment. A culture of clarity just reduces all of that friction. It makes communication predictable and straightforward. It supports real professionalism because everyone knows where they stand.
Okay, so the sources say the foundation for this is creating safety for honesty. But safety can be a really abstract word. How do you actually tangibly build that safety, especially if you're dealing with someone who has a long history of avoiding conflict?
Safety is built on consistency. It requires 2 main things. First, feelings have to be consistently respected, not dismissed. So when someone says, I feel hurt, the response can't be, you shouldn't feel that way, or you're overreacting.
Right.
And second, mistakes have to be met with understanding, not with an attack. If someone tries to be honest and they kind of fumble it, you meet that attempt with kindness. That sends a really consistent message. Your truth matters here, even if it's uncomfortable for me. Safety grows from predictable, gentle responses.
That makes so much sense. You're trying to replace the fear response with a trust response.
Hmm.
So what are the daily habits? What are the simple, repeatable things that build this culture?
You can start by regularly checking the emotional pulse of the relationship. Simple phrases like, hey, how are we doing on this project? Or is there anything we need to talk about that feels unresolved? Then commit to saying things directly, but always gently. Replace those vague hints with honest words. I would really appreciate your support on this, or I feel anxious when I don't hear back.
And the huge one, the habit of listening. We have to practice listening without that internal monologue planning our rebuttal. Just that one act calms the entire conversation because the other person feels truly heard, not just waited out.
And always, always clarify before you assume. So many conflicts escalate because of a basic misunderstanding. Before you react to what you think is a slight, just ask. Just to check, is this what you meant? Or, I interpreted that as X, can you tell me if I got that right? When you model that kind of clarity, you invite other people to stop hinting and start speaking. When we talk about healthy communication, we should probably anchor ourselves in 3 core qualities: clarity, respect, and responsibility. And responsibility is really the engine here. It forces you to own your own emotions rather than, blaming someone else for them.
Which means getting rid of that blaming language, the you always or you never, and replacing it with the very focused language of I feel and I need.
That is the whole transformation right there. You shift the focus entirely to your inner reality. So instead of you made me angry when you were late, you say, I felt stressed and worried when I didn't hear from you, and I need a quick text if you're running behind. You're communicating the emotional reality that you experienced.
This brings us to the actual structure for these tough conversations. The sources offer a pretty straightforward formula for respectful honesty.
Yes. It's a 3-step process, and it's designed to minimize defensiveness. Step 1. Start with empathy or some kind of shared understanding. Step 2, state your truth clearly using I statements. And 3, offer a constructive path forward. You focus on the change you want, not on past failures.
Let's put this into practice because this is what people really need. So consider that classic passive-aggressive comment you hear at work or at home. Fine, I'll just do it myself, like I always have to.
Ugh, yes. That statement is not a request, it's a resentment bomb. The hidden message is, I'm angry, I think you're lazy, and I want you to feel guilty. The clear request, using our formula, would be something like, I'm feeling really overwhelmed with my tasks right now. That's the clarity and responsibility. Can we look at the schedule together and share this so it's more manageable for both of us going forward? And that's the constructive path.
That's a fundamental shift. You're not attacking the person at all. You're explaining your internal state and inviting them to collaborate, which makes them way less defensive and much more likely to actually help.
It works because you're focused on the solution, not the fault. Let's take another one. Addressing built-up tension before it explodes. Instead of dropping hints about a problem, you can use what's called a soft opener.
And a soft opener, that immediately reduces the other person's fight or flight response.
Precisely. So instead of launching into an accusation, you start with, can I share something that I've been carrying, and would you be willing to just listen? Or maybe, I've been feeling some tension between us lately, and I'd really like to understand it together. It frames the conversation as a shared puzzle to solve, not a court hearing where someone has to be found guilty.
Okay, but what if you're on the receiving end? If someone else is being passive-aggressive toward you, they're sulking, or they're dropping sarcastic comments, how do you respond effectively without just reacting and feeding right into their cycle?
You have to stay calm, and you have to gently bring the issue into the light without attacking their character. The key is to name the emotional reality you're perceiving, not the specific behavior that annoyed you. For example, if a colleague says sarcastically, oh, I'm sure you did a perfect job on that report, instead of defending your work, you address the tone. You say, I noticed a bit of frustration in your voice just now. Is there something about the report bothering you, or is it something else?
You're calling out the tension, but with care. You're forcing the unspoken thing into a space where it can actually be dealt with using words.
That is the whole objective. You're demanding clarity and setting a boundary. You can be gentle but firm. I'm happy to talk about this, but I need honesty and clear feedback, not hints or sarcasm. Or, if they keep insisting nothing is wrong, you can set a physical boundary. You can say, if you're upset, let's talk about it later. For now, I'm going to step away and we can come back to this when we're both ready to be clear. You just refuse to participate in the emotional fog.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? The long-term payoff for choosing clarity over this hidden tension is, it's monumental. You get stronger, more authentic relationships that are built on trust. You drastically reduce your own stress because you're not carrying the burden of suppressed feelings, and you increase your own confidence every single time you choose to affirm your own truth.
The core idea to really internalize is that honesty, when it's wrapped in warmth, becomes a bridge, not a weapon. We have to commit to transforming our emotional triggers, observing them, labeling them, not just suppressing them, and to recognize that passive aggression is fundamentally just a frustrated voice that's searching for a safe place to exist.
The journey from unconscious passive aggression to mindful communication. It transforms fear into courage, suppression into clarity, and hesitation into genuine confidence. So if, as our sources suggest, when we truly believe that our voice is safe and valid, the world responds in kind, what small, honest experiment will you try this week to test that truth? Go find that honest experiment and we'll talk about what you learned next time.